Reef, welcome to the show. This is the Better Humans podcast. It's where we talk about entrepreneurship and business, but more importantly, how those are tools to like better ourselves. Like I believe that entrepreneurship is the greatest form of personal development that we can do, and then like business is how like the one of the best ways that we can go out and help others through mutual benefit, right? So, welcome to the show. This is everything that we're going to talk about today, and I'm very suspicious. I'll go ahead and call my shot ahead of time. I think you're going to be one of the best guests we could have possibly brought on because of all the different things that you're doing in personal development, in entrepreneurship, in business, in charity, and all the different stuff. So, first things first, it's so good to have you on here. We talked like a month ago, and dude, we just absolutely hit it off. I know that we're super similar in the fact that we both want to better humanity, and that's super awesome. But like the first conversation we had was absolutely amazing, and it left me really wanting to hear a lot more from you. So thanks for agreeing to come on a second time for like a legit podcast conversation. That's pretty cool. So I have so many questions, and I think here's where I want to start. And I hope it comes out of left field because it's something that I've noticed. So like I've been following you for like a month or so now.
Creepy. I like that. Keep going.
No, like on I've been in
That's
Scottsdale.
impressive. That's
Look
weird.
up, bro. Okay, on Instagram, right? And so I've seen some content floating around of you hanging out with some kids. Maybe you like got in like an educational program with some kids, teaching about business, teaching about entrepreneurship. And dude, you are so good with kids. Dude, I saw you. You're like fist bumping them, high fiving them, psyching them up, and like doing all this amazing stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's so good with kids. So like, where
Mm.
where does that come from? Is that something that like you've always just been like super hype, like amazing, like and obviously kids feed off that energy, or is that something that you like had to develop to like pursue a passion for fostering entrepreneurship? What is that, and how are you so charismatic with the kiddos?
Oh, dude. Yeah, great question. Number one, I want to say you're an awesome human. Just like
Ah,
right off the bat, that our conversation was magnetic, electric.
yeah.
There's sometimes you meet
Oh
people and
yeah.
it's just static electricity between them. You just feel like the buzz. I'm sure if we got into the same room together, we'd probably power a city or a small town. So, yeah,
Okay. All right.
I love the way
I
that.
I accept the invitation, by the way. Yeah.
Let's go, dude. You tell me where you're at. I'm flying. Yeah, what you said, I think, is so key and core fundamentally that I just want to piggyback off of because I don't think people have enough insight into that. Entrepreneurship is the greatest form of self improvement, self reflection. A person's business is a direct correlation between how deep they're willing to go into self. The deeper they're willing to go into self, the more depth that their company, their mission, their vision will have. Um, that's why most of my business are impact driven because I believe that entrepreneurship, or it's up to us as the entrepreneurs of our society, to better the next generation. Which leads into the youth. But
Mm,
in
okay.
that, the deeper work that we do to ourselves, or for ourselves, like the emotional regulation, emotional intelligence, the discernment trees, or the decision trees, or the decision matrix that we build out for ourselves, the principles that we live by, the core values we live by. Those things are replicatable and create in my opinion, a better society for several reasons. Number one, most people after college or high school, they really don't, expand the brain much. We kind of get into this rut. I imagine the brain like a body, the human body. I love brain work, like spec brain scanning and Busy Gold, which is an amazing practitioner that measures, your brain pattern and then gives you feedback on it, and then how to work through your brain. Wonderful humans. I'd love to do a warm intro. You'd love her. Uh,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, the brain is like imagining, someone doing right bicep curls and then left pistol squats nonstop. The brain is a whole body, but most people just train their right bicep and left pistol squat the whole rest of their lives. They get stuck in this routine, so they're only working two parts of their brain or a few parts, but on repeat. So patterns ingrained very heavily. Whereas entrepreneurs, we're constantly playing with our brain as a full scope. We're working out every part of our brain, and breaking ruts, breaking patterns, breaking past behaviors. We're really self-reflective, and in doing so, we end up being a different breed of human or of personality,
Yeah.
that I think we have an interesting relationship with pain. Where most people are pain adverse. We're like, you know what, pain. every time I've gone through hardship, pain, I've grown, you know? So you learn how to navigate pain chamber well, you know, differently than most people, you know?
I always
You
feel like if there's pain or if there's an obstacle, there's something I want on the other side of that. I
know,
know that that's just the way through.
that is such a simple reflection, you know, but you gain that through your journey. Most people are like,
Yeah.
oh, pain, yeah, I don't want that. This is an
Yeah.
obstacle. Like the book, The Obstacle is Away, you know. You get through these obstacles and you push through and you get to this, you know, heightened sense on the other side of it. So we almost become addicted to what's the next pain, what's the next challenge I'm going to gain, what's the next hardship I'm going to have, because it's all happening for you, you know. So we have different
Yeah.
mantras like the world isn't happening to me, it's happening for me, you know, kind of ideal. Like everything that's happened thus far has created the human that I am today. So it's all been a gift, it's all been a blessing. And what's the next blessing that's going to come? You know, the Chinese farmer mentality, you know, it doesn't matter, it's okay. You know, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. Don't put any emotion behind it. You know, sun comes home. Um,
Yeah. Oh, I
or
remember you telling me about this when we talked like a month ago. Yeah. The
the
Chinese, yeah.
the
It's
Chinese
just like what comes, what is what comes.
that parable is beautiful. You know, son comes home. He, you know, everyone's like rejoicing in the town. Well, good luck, he's here, and everyone's like, ah, yay! And the farmer goes, okay. You know, next day he's plowing the field. The son breaks his leg, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, how horrible! Everyone's distraught, and he goes, okay. You know, and the next day they're like drafting to war, and since his leg is broken, he doesn't get drafted. Everybody goes, well, good fortune, he won't get drafted. You know, like. This is great news. And he's like, okay, because you don't know what's going to come from an incident.
Right.
Don't put any emotional baggage to it. Just exist in the now. So I think that what you said is needs a lot of depth because I don't think people understand the true breadth, full breadth of how much entrepreneurship is about a journey into self. And the deeper you go into self, the more people you can impact, the more you can do in the world, the more people you can help and serve. So I just want to, your comment is the gravitas of your comment is huge. You know, it's a lot of weight to it. I hope people understand your mission and vision. What you're trying to do is absolutely
Yeah.
beautiful. Explaining that to people and trying to translate that. You know, to the youth, just along the journey of us and self development, you know, the youth is the single biggest investment we can make as a civilization, you know, is into the next generation. And I would say that kids fascinate me in the sense that we should all have a childlike heart. You know, kids are free,
Mm.
kids are happy. You know, kids have a joy to them. You know, kids can imagine it. You know, they can be in the living room and the floor is lava. You know, and there's a dragon they're fighting. We lose our dragon over a lifetime. You know, we lose our
Huh.
lava. We stop seeing the world through these magnetic kaleidoscope eyes, and we start to just see it for what it is, this structure that we've created, rather than this beautiful place of imagination, ideation. You know, I gravitate towards youth because I know that that is what our next generation is. You know, I believe in a selfless life. And there's a lot of forms of selflessness, but I believe the most selfless thing that you could do as a species is to serve and plant a tree or a seed of which you won't benefit from the shade, you know? And what aligns me to that, I have three core mission statements. My business mission statement is to feed as many people around the world as humanly possible through equally advantageous opportunities. That includes food, you know, fiscally, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You know, how do you feed the next generation so you make a 1% better grade? My personal mission is to make the world a better place so that future generations can have a better platform to answer some of the questions we haven't yet answered. The most selfless thing we could do to give to the next generation is let them understand and see that, you know, you don't have to have the answer, but you could be a part of a greater answer. And that's a huge gift to our species, our humanity, our collective, our
Yeah.
whole, you know, consciousness. Like what, you know, some of the greater questions, like what is consciousness? Why are we here? The brain we're just tapping into, space, ocean, the exploration of all things, you know, asking deeper, harder questions of our reality. Those are all huge gifts. And I believe that we should continue and prolong that as much as possible by making the world a more collective place and recognizing that we are one species on one rock flying through space at 22,000 miles an hour around a star that we call the sun because it's the closest one to us. And we don't know where we're going. We're on a trajectory course towards the Andromeda galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy. We'll collide at some point. We don't know what this is all about, but we should continue exploring to figure that out. And my North Guiding Star, simply put, is how do our inputs today impact the next 2, 5, or 10 generations? You know, like how are you? The most purposeful litmus test that I have is what I'm doing today impacting the next 2, 5, or 10 generations to a better curve or a worse curve. And that's just a simple way of aligning whatever your decisions are daily.
Okay. Here's a question. I hope I don't ask this and throw a wrench in everything.
No, hit it.
But if you subscribe to the idea of the Chinese farmer that just says okay, whatever comes next is what it is not good nor is it bad. How do you align that with the actions you take have the intention of doing good in the future and not bad in the future?
Oh, I love this question. I think about the time of being in San Diego. I fed the homeless every Monday um, for like 4 years, and I got to see it get really out of control over COVID. Um, um, I think we don't know the inverse effects to our actions. Example, they made illegal the thin plastic bags, so now they're 10 cents a unit to buy a plastic bag. They're the thicker ones, I don't know
Right.
how environmentally friendly, but they said they were. How I don't know if they disintegrate better or what the deal was with them. However, what ended up happening was a hepatitis A outbreak. The act of trying to do a good deed by taking bags away for free and making them a cost prohibitive action so that we would utilize less bags and bring our own bags made it so that homeless people wouldn't buy the bags, which they used to get for free, to defecate in and not throw in the street. So instead of now homeless people
No.
have, yeah, yeah, correct. Instead of them having a bag
Oh,
to defecate in, they were defecating on the street, and a hepatitis A outbreak broke out, and they had to clean out all the streets of homeless people and power spray everything. So there is kind of an inherent, we don't know what the inverse effect of a good deed or a deed from good posture is going to create. That's a new problem to solve, a new challenge. I think the best thing we can do as humans is accept that there are challenges, and how we react or respond to
yeah.
challenges is what makes us better. So when they come up, we overcome them. My curve to answer that question is simply, what are you aligning with, to make the next generation better? Well, you can find the things that unite us as a species rather than the things that divide us is a great place to start. I think a lot of people have the conversations, well, you're gay, you're straight, you're black, you're white, you're Asian, you're not, all these things, a Democrat, Republican, Catholic, Christian, Mormon, like
Yeah.
different, religions, you name it. We have so many divisive labels for our species. Well, instead of asking what unites us as a species, we're all sapiens. We're all bipedal hominids. We all have brains, the most powerful organism in the known universe. No other organism has named itself. They consider that. No other organism has said, I am brain, Like it literally labeled itself and then decided to label everything else. Your liver wasn't like,
Right.
a liver, I'm a stomach, that didn't happen. It's like the brain is the most powerful unit we all share in common. We also have blood, we all have hearts, we all have a beating ecosystem, right? We all have, for the most part, a want for our offspring to do better than we did. We all want to be fed. We all want to have our common needs met. We all have these things that, for the most part, we can align on as a species. I think the closer you get to the alignment of those things that unite us as a species, the better our future could be. So that's a good like litmus test or a question to ask. Next one is like, what are the things that we should keep going? Well, consciousness. We're a very fragile species. We're very underdeveloped. And we still fight for dirt. Like
Yeah.
if I've imagined aliens overhead looking at us just laughing. Like if I gave you a bag of dirt for your birthday, you'd be like, Reef, what the French toast, bro? Like, why did you give me a bag of dirt? But if I give you an acre or a parcel or, a plot of land, you're like, thank you, because we've labeled it differently. It's funny how
Hmm.
we create these structures and we very primitive still as a species. We haven't figured out that we are one species on one rock, and this is our only spaceship that we have currently. We must preserve it with every ounce of our being. I think once we have these kind of parameters that we set as a society and say, these are the things that we should really focus on, not the Kardashians, not whose lips are bigger, don't fill your lips, fill your brain, kind of ideal, these, these things that are like,
Bro, that's good. I want that on a sticker. Stop filling your lips, fill your brain.
that hot girl walk, hot girl walk with a book and Audible. How about that? Like these kind of things that make our species better and aligning with those things as a unified whole, I think are important, right? So
Hmm.
we can't assume what will be better for the next species, but we can have some pretty educated guesses or assumptions. Like a zero footprint humanity or species, where we learn to coexist with nature rather than just terraform everything.
Yeah.
learn to work alongside of it, right? Pour into education or the next generation, learn emotional regulation habits, co-regulation to youth, and then emotional regulation, allowing them to do it for themselves, right? Understanding that the people in front of us aren't the enemy. We are the enemy ourselves. And if we overcome self, we have no enemies because no one's trying to hurt us. We just hurt ourselves through how we take in the data or inputs from outside world. Like these kind of
Yeah.
things create a better, more holistic group of people, that we shouldn't be fighting over deities or land or belief systems, but rather asking each other, what is important about your belief system that you hold, that you appreciate most? And is it good for the common good of the whole of the people? Does it serve all? And then asking more of those questions. This very scientific approach, until further data, suspend all judgment and use the five senses to figure out if this is best for all of us.
So your your ideologies actually have me they have me questioning so many different things right now. And the very first thing is because you likened it to, like, if I gave you a bag of dirt, you'd be like, why? But then if someone gets gifted land, or maybe even through an estate, like it was part of the family and then it's inherited down, like ownership of the dirt that we all stand on, it really has me questioning, like, what are your beliefs on, I'll I'll separate these two:
Okay.
value and money.
Okay, that's I'm gonna write these down to kind of keep them on the forefront there. I'm a big note taker. My Notion boards are absurd.
Yeah,
Val-
Notion's driving our conversation right now too. But I, kind of actually, I'm in no man's land right now. But like this is what's popping out to me, and the reason why is because, like, you're like, well, if like 2, 3, 5, 10 generations from now, like, who cares whose name was on the deed of what plot of land was here, and like all this, like, it might not matter. And you're right, it might not matter. But what we still, like, we're beings that exist in the present time, so like it does, but ultimately, eventually, it won't. So, what are your thoughts on, like, objects or items of value, like, and things that are money, like, and I don't mean currency or like fiat, like, or anything like that. I mean like money, like, think objects of desire and objects of value.
yeah, I love. First off, are you using Fireflies at all?
Right now, no.
Okay, I'm gonna. My gift to you is I'm gonna do an AI automation implementation for you. I'm gonna install Fireflies for you with Notion. You're gonna lose your mind. So I'm gonna have my team reach out and
Okay.
we'll get it for you as a gift. So thank you for that. And then you can
Yeah.
share how good that was for you. Value. I think value is intrinsic to all people. I think an important thing to understand is that we're all sapiens seeking entertainment. We're all just, monkeys chasing the next branch to hang off of, kind of deal. Some people find entertainment in business building, making the future better. Some find it in rock climbing, others in kayaking, some in gaming, some in drama, some in the theater, the act. We're all just seeking entertainment, something that gives us value. Which is fair. That's kind of the now value of self. We're here, the self
Hmm.
indulgence. Like, what are we trying to do? I think great thinkers find value in the future. And what is going to bring value to future generations. That's how they think of the world, solving a problem now that will flip a switch for the future. Some of the greats, the wheel, combustion engine, electricity, the Ethernet card, these things, the people that created these things, unsung heroes of our generation. My big push in the AI space is that thing that I shared with you, the Learning Center for AI. That's an
Yeah.
online educational place where people break out into rooms and everyone gets to learn different softwares, different things, that modalities to do in operations or their business roles, or by business type or category, or niche. Everyone has like a little bit of an insight on different things. You can ask an expert, and the expert will walk you through in an hour to 2 hour class on what's going on, and then shared knowledge. I think the people that we should idolize in our society for value are the scientists, the engineers, the doctors, the thought leaders. Right now, currently in society, and it's all about how we feed it to the masses. Right now, we feed to the masses drama because we're like, like Love Is
Yeah.
Blind, whatever, Love Island, all these things that people are like, we kind of get stuck into these things because they matter to us. It says a lot about our species. We care about partnership, romanticism. We care about the drama. We're engaged in it. But you
Yeah.
could package that same modal into science, into our culture, into the things that are more ethereal, that are actually building the rubrics of our society. Like, we got to take to account that we created a language called mathematics that's universal. And with that language, we discovered how to articulate what is lift, air, flight. What once was to gods, we were like, oh my gosh, look at that. We now have as a transportation bus system. It feels like a metro. You know, you jump on a Spirit
Yeah.
airline.
Yeah.
I haven't done it in a while. You get on a Spirit airline, and you're like, what's happening here? You know, we're in tin cans flying through space, you know, to get to another destination. We created that and we don't give that enough weight. So for me, value comes from how are you bettering the next generation? You know, how are you, what are you doing to the next, what is a future generation going to truly care about? Are they going to care about Kardashians lip filler? No, I doubt highly. It'll be more of like a, oh, that's interesting. These sapiens at this time thought that this was beauty. The same way there's, there's other, we got like duck lips or whatever, right? Like just
Yeah.
other
The
system.
everyone that was doing the like
Yeah,
that pose with
yeah.
the gotta throw the peace sign.
Yeah, dude, I'm gonna do that and tag you in it today on my stories and be like, to our society, like that kind of deal, like, we look back at, generations and we look at people that disc their lips and we think, that's crazy. Or the people that have the long, elongated necks and they consider that beauty. And we're like, that's weird. Well, that's the same thing future generations are gonna think about us. And be like, that's odd. That was of its time, and
Right.
it's fleeting. It's very now. Whereas things like aqueduct, Roman aqueduct systems. You look at that and you
Mhm.
go, wow, that was a huge innovation that transcended time and space. The Romans and their infrastructure of government and judgment and rule, and you're like, whoa, that's a fascinating thing. The idea that we went from hunters and gatherers to agricultural. My favorite quote is, "Did we plant wheat or did wheat plant us?" Because before that we were just like this like walking nomadic species, and then out of nowhere we're no longer nomadic, and we have, instead of 1-to-1 food source or 1-to-3 food source, we have a 1-to-20 food source being built, and now you start to build civilization. So these larger ethereals, I think, are the things that create more value. So look at history. What has brought us the most amount of value to this point, because we have the data.
Yeah.
How do you keep replicating that for the future? Things that last, withstand time, and matter. They make our civilization better as a whole. That's value to
I
me.
heard something recently, and it's like a tongue in cheek kind of joke, but basically it's this idea that like scientists at some point in the future got to a point where they were able to replicate the creation of life, right?
Mm.
And so they go to God and say, God, we don't need you anymore. We were able to create life on our own. And so man, and God says, oh, please, by all means, show me. So man gets down on the dirt. He gathers his collection of dirt, and God goes, whoa, 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 stop. Get your own dirt, right? Like that whole concept of like, you know what I'm saying though?
Yeah.
Like, okay, so the question was like, did we plant wheat or did wheat plant us? It's like, well, I think we know which one it is because like we didn't build wheat. Wheat existed, right?
Right. Right.
So
And
there's your
That's
there's your
I think
answer.
that's beautiful, and it comes to like some people are asking AI now, like has AI, did we invent AI? And it gave a fascinating answer. It said,
I've seen
yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my god, it broke my brain. It broke
It's
my
so good.
brain, dude.
It's so good. Same concept. It has existed. We are just now on the wave of discovering it and how to utilize it. The same way wheat existed, but is it? I asked a question like, are we actually being farmed by data? Like, is data actually what has been doing this the whole time? Like synapses, mushrooms, and I'll get to money in a moment here. Like things like mushrooms, right? The mycelium system underneath the earth, right? What does that look like, as a whole? This network of fungi, if you look at the human
Yeah.
brain and the central nervous system, the cortex, we look like a giant mushroom, even from our penile function, almost looks like a mushroom itself, like there's a lot of oddities to the mushroom and mycelium system, and how, even it figured out how to do the Japanese railway faster than the Japanese had created underground. If you haven't seen this, it's fascinating. Petri dish looks like the all the routes for the Japanese railway system underneath, and
Hmm.
then they put food at the other side, and the mushroom, the mycelium, in the fastest way possible, reached the food, and it redesigned or redeveloped how they use the Tokyo underground railway system. So you look at this like intelligence that's very simple. Our biggest species on the planet is mushroom. It's number one, right?
Yeah.
Yourself, okay,
Yeah.
that's well. even to the point where they farmers in Australia had 4 plots of land, and you weren't allowed to overgraze. And two of the farmers on the cubby corner decided to overgraze or overgrow their antelope, whatever they were. I forget what the creature was, but I digress. And what ended up happening was the plants underneath created their main food source to become a diuretic and started killing off a portion of the herds in these two cubby corners. But the same plants existed in the other two cubby corners, but were not affected. We have a higher to the my second mission statement, these questions that are unanswered. We have a series of questions that we don't know yet that are fascinating about our species or about our planet, about our existence, that we get to keep asking. So when I
Yeah.
find that about like AI, or that answer that AI gave, has all this been here, and are we now being placed in a position where it's being discovered, or are we being led to these things that are kind of the eventual growth of what a species is? We just have only known our species and haven't seen other species, but our job is to learn to coexist with all of it and harness it as a tool, money being a tool. Yeah, money is a
Right.
tool like any other. Money is the coin of today. Whose coin is this? Whose head is on it? Caesar. Very simply
Yeah.
put, like it is a tool for today, and you can choose that tool to either be masterful and a creator and a builder of wonderful things, or a destroyer of things. You really, the responsibility of money is just today's playing chip token of what we have nominated as a value. But the whole ideal of it is, kind of silly. I give a piece of, I like collecting money from around the world. So this is like my around the world money, but to think that we
Yeah.
have been these pieces of paper, a collective value, like, yeah. And we say, this is Guatemala, which I think is absolutely beautiful. Oh, you too? Yes, yes, yes. Like we've given these things paper, like this value, and we say, I'm going to trade my most valuable resource, time, on this planet for this concept, and through that I'll create a trade and barter system to exist. And we're willing for this tool to sell our family, our parents, our youth, our children off to slavery, or whatever we have to at the worst cases, right? Or even just our precious time with our loved ones, to be able to curate more of this is a fascinating ideal that we've created as a species. So to me, money is kind of a game. You're just playing
Can
this.
you put it on, I don't want to say pro or con, but are you for or against this idea, or you think that like this is like an eventual, like it will be gone one day, like the concept of like there goes my time in exchange for this physical thing, and like everything rusts, decays, and destroys, right? But I'll never get that time back. Like, are you? I don't want to put you on like one side of the fence or the other, but like, do you lean one way where you're like, honestly, I'm kind of over this whole money thing, or you're like, no, I get it. Like, we use money, we leverage money, and like it's I won't call it a necessary evil, but like a necessity for this day and age. I'm really trying not to lead your answer, but the more I talk, I'm like,
No,
stop talking.
I want to think, I love your heart. No, I love I think the greatest questions are ones where you have to take a moment to think about them. I think a lot of people kind of go for gut shot answers. But I think, um, until further data, suspend all judgment, right, is a core value that I hold. And I think if we look at, the playing field of our species up until this point, 60, 70,000 years of you know, uh, conscious evolution, as we've grown to be who we are today. I think that we can look at the animal kingdom to see that there are things that matter most to a species, and that's self-preservation. And
Hmm.
every
Right.
species has a game of let me flaunt so I can find my partner, which money helps in some ways. I
Hmm.
think there's also, building ecosystems, like the birds that have to build a beautiful nest in order to have the best partner. Even as hunters and gatherers and tribes, the one that had the most value proposition at the time was the one that had the biggest, muscles, the biggest safety, the best knowledge of the land, could kill the most, and had the best a pick of mates.
Right.
I think our species is ingrained to have a form of of competition or collection, you know? So that's, and that brings a bigger question. Do we fight our human component, or do we learn to work with it, right? So that's kind of an offset question
Yeah.
there that kind of builds.
So
But I would,
it sounds like what I'm hearing you say is like this is a core facet to humanity. It has always been. It is likely that it will always be.
That's where I want to say not enough data to, I don't know if it will always be, but I would say for the immediate future, or as we're living and
Yeah.
existing, a trade of some sort for another is a component that helps civilization and society grow. Now, what does that look like in the future? Maybe we have, you know, a currency that's electric, or an online currency or a digital currency that is one for people that, you know, clean, or one that keep earth good, or replant trees, you know, because we have no more jobs, in essence, because of automation. Now we're more taking care of our reality around us, and we're being rewarded for being good humans, good behavioral humans, and good, keepers of the future. Who makes those
Right.
rules is where I would like to be with thought leaders in the future, hopefully, you know, and saying like, hey, let's create a better, holistic, unified front that is more concerned about what 2, 5, 10 generations are doing, rather than
Yeah.
got the latest cell phone, which is literally just breaking and destroying our current reality just to build more of it, just to trash more of it, instead of thinking, because that's what the money game creates, sadly, you know, like,
Yeah.
utility of recreating, rather than saying, let's build one thing really well because it's better for our future generation, and make sure that people have a really good thing, several really good things to compete against, because we need free market trade. But now you have these products that last longer, and the value behind them is how long they last. And instead of us paying to get more of it, we get paid for maintaining and keeping these things well and being good stewards of our reality. We get paid. Like, in the ecosystem I have with We Assist, I pay people for education. Every week they join on and they get a class on emotional intelligence, agree and disagree, having hard conversations, child development, you know, AI tools. I pay them to attend those classes. I think our future, we should pay our youth. A school district gets $90 to $80 a kid, or $75 a kid. Why are we not paying those kids $10, $20 for attending school on a daily basis, and show them the value of money, or of them working? And then if the family wants to use it for good, let them do it. If they are hurting
Yeah.
in a family, they use it for food, you know, whatever. Save it or utilize it. But I think that in the immediate future, the exchange of a good for another good is pretty primal. You know, in exchange for like safety, you know, mates and captivity, primates, you know, take care of one another, and they choose that safety because that's an exchange. You know, I'll be here with you because you'll take care of me.
Yeah.
But if you put a token in, the funny, interesting thing is, you know, gorillas start getting, or chimpanzees, I forget what a primate was, but they get a token and they start trading it for sex because they find this value for it. And that's one of the first trade-offs that they do is exchanging for sex amongst primates. So fascinating that we understand the function of, I know, I'll send you the link. It's a fascinating documentary. But you know, you have these things, and it's monkeys. You know, they have no
Yeah.
understanding of society. They have no understanding of, you know, our cultural
Right.
difference. But sometimes, somehow, they seem to understand this trade, and then those chips are traded for good fruit. You know, yummy fruit by the keepers, or however that's
Yeah.
studied. You know, um, so
Hey,
the
really
trade.
fast. I don't want this to pass by. I just realized that we have another huge similarity that we both opt for, like that whole thought process, the algorithmic thought process where you're like, well, it's not A, it's not B because I don't have enough information yet. Therefore, it is C, do nothing. I I quote that at least once a week. I'm in a position with like software and tooling and users and marketing and sales that where like you have to make decisions on a regular basis, and a lot of times I defer on those decisions because I'm like, we just don't have enough data to make the best decision, or one of the best decisions we can make. And so I'm like, if pitted between option A and option B and nothing is clear, option C, do nothing.
I love the way you articulate that. Until further data, suspend all judgment. You know, it's such a, you know, powerful way of operating, because then you're not, you know, future casting things. Like, this is, I want to be very clear for everyone that's, you know, listening to us or whatever, what have you, is I'm, you know, I am one perspective of the human
Right.
experience. You know, this is not God. This is not truth. This is not all seeing, all being. I am putting together the best formula I can, articulate what I believe in a function that hopefully helps many. You know, that's what I'm trying to do. And if there's other people, then we should rely on, until further data suspend all judgment, a scientific method of let's bring these up to the table and then let's look at which one fits best to each other. You know, like, we've been planted on this planet. Like, God gave us the ability to have free choice and free will, and we are here and we are doing. We must be good stewards of our tokens. Are we going to bury them? Are we going to keep them level, or are we going to multiply them by 10? We have that opportunity, and we should use the tools that we have at our disposal that we've created thus far. One of those being the scientific method of just bringing things up to us, not angry because you gave me an ideal and it contradicts mine, but rather, wow, that ideal has some validity to it. Other people are following it. What are they following from that? Let's unify that and see what we can create as a better answer.
Hmm.
That I
Yeah.
believe is what is good. Money is a wonderful way of playing today's game board. It's all it is. It's today's monopoly. It's all obviously very colorful cash. The next one might be cryptocurrencies, digital currencies. Again,
Yeah.
another format of the game board. You're just playing these game boards. And Elon Musk is one of my favorite human beings on the planet because he had these ethereal thoughts to create things. He didn't go out and beg for money. He didn't try to figure it out by, like, raising funds or whatever. He literally said, "Oh, banking is flawed. It's broken. I'm going to get into it in a digital format. This is outdated. Here I go." And then Bank X, or X, whatever it was, turned into PayPal, right? That he jumped into with the PayPal mafia.
Yep.
And then the
Yep.
rest is history. Then he reinvested all of his dollars. He put all of his chips. He said, "I'm gambling on these ideals: solar, space, and electric vehicles." What a brilliant player to say, "I'm going to play the game board at the highest level, achieve the chips that I need to re-gamble and bet on myself, and not allow it to be with anybody else, and show people what I'm capable of." That to me is a brilliant mind, and that's kind of where my ideals stem from. I'm playing the game board of capitalism, conscious capitalism, making sure you take what you need and give to the rest, right? And then creating as much opportunity as I can for others to make a better future. Don't complain about the future. Don't complain about your now. Don't complain about your issues. Get up and fucking do something about it. Simply put.
Yes.
And that is an ideal that I live by, is just get after it. You want something to change? Be that change. You're tired of society being a certain way? Be the first example of society being in a better way. And if it's good enough for many, then it's good enough for all, then so be it. But if it's not good enough for all, then take that data and be humble enough to say, maybe I have somewhere to realign this. So yeah, money is just a today's value, today's token, today's coin, it used to be chips, used to be, cattle, used to be trading farmland, used to be, denarii, salary, salarium. You'd pay a Roman soldier in salt because it was more weighted than gold. And that's where the word salary comes from. People would get paid on a monthly
Yep.
stipend of salt, salarium. All these things just build off of each other. We have to look at the trends of why society did this and how we can leverage those trends to better our future society. Is kind of how I view the world. Yeah.
Dang. Dude. Okay.
I love you. I love your brain.
Uh, no, this is the problem, is that, like, uh, time, dude. Time is the problem. But, like, okay,
It's a
here's the
gift.
thing.
Yeah.
I
Time's a
want
challenge.
to,
You know.
yeah, okay. Here's what I want to do. So there's one important question that I wanted to ask you that has to do with your lifestyle. So, like, I noticed that, like, you do a ton of traveling. But you do it in a way that, like, you're usually meeting up with other people. You get together in, like, groups or, like, in masterminds. But you guys all get together and you like do amazing things. You build amazing things together. Like, is this a lifestyle that you designed with intention and purpose, or because you went and like, let's say, like, pursued wealth or pursued money? Is this something that you just kind of, like, naturally fell into doing, and it ended up being kind of like a fun thing?
I love that. What a question. Yeah, by the way, I think question askers are the most brilliant people on the planet, and I love the way you form your questions and the thought process behind your questions. Question askers, curiosity, those are those childlike wonders that are beautiful. The why,
Yeah.
right?
This
The
podcast is it's stretching me in a lot of ways. That muscle, like, you were like, oh, brain's only doing two muscles ever. Like, now I'm doing back squats with both sides of my brain, and they're one side's upside down. Like it's stretching me in the exact way that you put it, because I didn't used to ask questions like this, but finally I'm surrounding myself with people that are like doing gigantic things. Like literally, you're talking about generations. You're not talking about what you're gonna do next week. You're talking about giant stuff, and I'm like, oh, I gotta think on the generations level that Reef is thinking at now. Like it's crazy. But anywho, I
I love,
digress. Back to
thank
the
you for
question.
thank you for allowing me to be that type of human in your life, and I hope you've seen it a lot in me as well. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think we should. To your point, people are everything. Your environment, the people you're around. So to what you just said, correct. I seek the world for wonderful humans. People that are also aligned with a tribal thinking of making the world a better place. You find enough of those people, then you don't seem crazy. Around the wrong people, the smartest minds could seem crazy. Let's take
Yeah.
a little short walk back 100 years. Einstein creates the theory of relativity, E equals mc squared, right? Now everyone's like, why did they choose it? Because he got the answer back to one whole integer, God, and everyone's like, this is the number, this is relativity, this is it. Quantum mechanics was happening at the same time, but people called it crazy, like a farce, like that stop it. Relativity's been figured out. Physics is here, like we don't need any
Yeah.
more. We have to think God, think the universe, think people, think society, species, humanity, these beings that lived in a dungeon, in a basement, punching numbers away when no one else would, thinking this is something we should explore because it's not enough data to say that it's dismissive. There's still something
Right.
there until we have the tools of today where we can see the double split experiment, and quantum mechanics and how the quantum realm is functioning. Now we have a whole other slot of questions. A theory that brought some mathematicians to commit suicide in the 80s was the theory of there's always a problem bigger than the knowledge circle, right? So there's a circle, the problem is here, then the problem's outside that circle, you put a dot there, and then the circle grows outside of that dot because it's a new problem to solve. Then there's a new one, and the problem would solve. The thing that some mathematicians lived off of was that with math, one day everything would be structured and zero planed out. We would know how everything functions and works. But the theory that has been adopted is that there's always going to be a problem outside of the problem that we've discovered for, and there's a new
Yeah.
discovery. And that brought some people to suicide. Poor mathematicians. Maybe
Yeah.
weeding out the herd. Who knows? But that it ended up happening the way it happened. So I think when you talk about design, it is a big portion of why I exist. I believe in designing. You have to be the creator of your reality. Major ownership. I have core principles that I live off of, and also you said of making money. I have core principles of how I choose friends. So these core values are what I live by, and I actually have them written out inside my notes because I believe in looking at them frequently whenever I have an incident or an issue or something that I want to overcome. So don't mind my screen. I was playing soccer with some kids and I dropped it on rocks, but
Oh, that's all right.
there's my principles on how I choose friends. And then I have a huge series of other principles that I live by that just are like things that I follow, my own rule book
Yeah.
that I created for my reality, essentially. So I designed my life. I think major ownership is one of my core values, and we have to take major ownership on all the decisions we make are either for good or indifferent or whatever, right? Good or bad, if you want to name it that way. I believe in
Yeah.
WNLs, wins and learns, not wins and losses. And since learning is winning, I'm constantly winning. It's kind of the way I frame my mind. But in the reality of making decisions, major ownership is you are the designer of your reality. Cool, I digress. So that's kind of the framework, right? Or the baseline there to build off of. I wanted to build a life of impact. I wanted to build a life where I got to travel. Poor kid from Uruguay, humble roots, to be able to see the Eiffel Tower. Yeah, watch a boy weep. I was like, holy cannoli, I am here. My sapient experience has guided me here. There are people that never leave their 2 mile radius, God
Yeah.
forbid. I get to see this with my eyes. How special and lucky and fortunate I am, that I've done this. But also, celebrating the hard works that I've done to get there. I've made the decisions. I've struggled. I drove Uber 4 a.m. to 9 a.m. In LA to do LAX runs, get $60, $80 a run. And then I'd work from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. in an office, $500 a month, no AC, no heater. Thing was a sweatshop. I would sweat through my clothes, so I had to do all my meetings on Wednesdays with clients because I could be in my Prius with the AC beating and going to the next destination and not have to sweat through everything. The rest of the days I was in a literal sweatshop, driving a Prius in the time when everybody was buying the Mustang, the Camaro, pickup trucks. But I could see that the economy was going to do a weird turn. I thought, gas is going to get more expensive, I think. So I jumped into a Prius. Biggest reward I could have given myself. Everyone else is parked trucks, parked cars, not going anywhere. I was driving for $20 a week, trying to get to places. I would Uber, Postmates, DoorDash, 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. or midnight every day. This is launching my first company. On Fridays and Saturdays, I'd Uber till 4 or 5 in the morning in Hollywood because Dodger Stadium, events, everything, you name it. I'd have water bottles, gum, mint in the back of my Prius, handing it out to people as like a, hey, just leave me an extra tip and take it with you, if you need it. I can't tell you how many people going on dates would be like, oh, you have gum? Bro, thank you, Probably they wanted to make out that night. And I maybe might be responsible for some babies in LA, And then you have Sundays. Reproduce. I'd go to Los Angeles, or I'd go to church on Sundays, and then I'd go to the dollar store and I would buy sunscreen for 99 cents, and then I'd go to the beach with a backpack and sell them for $10 a pop out of my backpack, make an extra $200, $300. 7 days a week for a year and 9 months to launch my first company. Like, you make decisions that impact your future. You create your life of design, by design. You have to be willing to sacrifice and go through things to create the reality that you want to live. Important, I think, message for people is last year's prayers are today's blessings. Don't turn them into curses. We're so quick to forget that last year I begged to be a person that could fly to different masterminds and go to different events and be a part of that circle. Last year I flew 78 hours, more than a week of my time was spent flying. I was in the air a week of my humanity, which is a fascinating thing to think about. So I have 178 hours of flight, and instead of being like, oh man, my life, I'm like, oh wow, I begged for this. I remember I'm tired right now. True.
I
prayed for this reality, and I'm here now, so I get to be a good steward of that reality that I prayed for. So I choose the life that I've created, and like a pro athlete, you have to stick to what you're doing. You're regimented, you're eating your habits, you're going to bed early because you believe in what you're doing. If you want to be the best at something at the pinnacle or the apex, you have to play whatever you're playing at the highest level, no matter what it is. You could be a pickleball player, but be the best pickleball player you want to be. You must
be a 5.0 or 5.5. I don't. They keep lifting it, but anywho, literally.
Play the game you want to play and play it at a high level, and don't, if you don't make it to the high level, only look at self to be like, I should have done this differently. I should have navigated this differently. I could have made a better decision here. And that's, my life. Money is a byproduct of the life that I live. It's not my goal. It's like just a byproduct it's a tool to get to the next stage or build the next thing. It's all it is. It's like not important, not valuable in my sphere of thinking. It's not a valuable, it's not what should run and rule and control you. It is a byproduct of you being a good human, servicing the world the way it needs to be serviced, helping people where they need to be helped. You are rewarded for being a good steward of others and helping others along their journey as a sapien. You do that well, then you're rewarded monetarily. That's just like the number to how good you're impacting the world is what money is, in my opinion.
Okay.
I view it. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Dude. Okay. So I keep looking at the clock.
What time is it?
I want to be cognizant of your time.
I have
you've got
the next hour.
Big stuff.
My calendar well. We've learned with Kate that anytime I do a podcast, I separate the next hour because usually there's fallout from the calls that I have with people, and we end up talking for a bit longer, or something happens. And
okay. Okay, then. Okay.
Mind you, I don't die tomorrow. So I love you enough to be like, we can jump on as many of these as you want because I just love talking to you, and it's awesome to be able to share this with I think great thinkers. If we could look back in humanity and say, man, I would love to see Augustine talk, or Caesar, or Einstein, a Cameron Einstein, like they do now with Elon Musk. People judge him left and right, but we're watching him, genius of our time, and have a window into him. Better than ever before. And instead of people just being like in awe, like, wow, how does this person function? They judge, like, well, he's doing this. Bro, Get out of the stands, go play the game, do it better than him. Otherwise, don't talk. Appreciate genius,
Yes.
golf clap, and stay quiet. And if you have an opinion, go do that better opinion. Like I don't care for useless opinions.
They can't have here's okay. All right. I'm going off script again, by the way. I'm going off script. So
No
here's
script.
the thing. How how can you expect? And by the way, we're basically in a distribution of society where it's like we used to be like 80% entrepreneurial and like maybe 20% of people like were in like indentured servitude or like or slavery and different things like that, but basically like of America. And so now we're in a distribution of like 7% entrepreneurship and 93 in like employment and servitude, right?
Mhm.
We talk about like lenses and frames and perspectives, like how how do you expect somebody who has I don't I don't have it, dang it. Like we'll say they like this is one lens, this is my entrepreneurial lens, and then
Uh-uh.
someone else is looking through their lens and they can't see the
Mm,
way that you see.
mm,
Like I ran into this issue kind of recently. So like we had a family issue, right?
yeah,
And one of our family members made a decision for someone who needed to go into a nursing home. And like a lot of us disagreed about that because of like quality of life, quality of food, like the mental decline, and like just the stats around
sure.
taking someone who's elderly and putting them into a home. We fundamentally disagreed. And we're like, well, we have resources, we have capability, there are options, but the person who made that decision couldn't see what we saw because they view things through the lens of scarcity,
Hmm.
not through the lens of abundance.
Hmm. Hmm.
So how do you look at like 97% of America, or what 93% of America and be like, you should be thinking of it this way, but like they don't have the lens for it.
Mm,
I'm like,
mm.
how do you relate to those people so that they can see through your lens without it being like, or like, can you like, I don't even know. Like,
I thank you for the ethereal question that you're asking, which is a societal future scope question. Yes, 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 times 10,000 yes. And just to give a little context or reiteration to make sure I heard this correctly, you're essentially asking the question of how do you reach masses that can't see through the experience that you've seen and try to relay a message in a format that lands to them when you have the knowledge base that you have in order to help them have a better future for themselves. How do we feed that information? And it sounds to me like the big one
yeah,
was in this coming to a head with your family, which by the way I now I'm a grateful enough son to be able to give my mom an allowance monthly. She once gave me an allowance, I now give her an allowance, and she's
nice.
every month I get the same message, mijo, I love you, thank you. um, I won't, I won't put her in a home. I aim to have a big enough home to have her in the house until, wow, I felt emotional regulation. I felt a sensation of crying there. That was interesting.
Mhm.
The idea of my mom passing is a fascinating one. But I will
I'll
have,
tell
I will,
you also my grandmother is also she's one of the most independent women I've ever met. She divorced my grandfather and probably for about 45 years she's been living on her own in the most powerful of circumstances.
mm,
Like exercised at like 85 plus is exercising 5 days a week, owns her home, owns rental homes, like
wow.
uh gifts me investment books. Like she's stellar, dude. She is stellar.
What an,
And COVID did a number well, a to her when she had it when she was sick, did a number to her oxygen, her O2 sats, and um then she basically formed dementia after that because her oxygen sat at 83 for too long. And now she's in a spot where it's like I will drive her out to dinner and she's like, okay, well, what car are we in? It's like, but she just got out of the car that we were just in.
yeah.
and she can't, like, the short term isn't there, but she can tell you stories from 20 years ago. So her short term is just, it's botched, it's bad. And we've tried a ton of different stuff to remedy it, and like approached it from a food standpoint, and tried a bunch of like we'll call it like unorthodox experimental approaches to this as well,
Mhm.
thinking that it's a form of like type 3 diabetes.
Mhm.
Nothing has seemed to stick, and I think that's maybe why my these family members have gone this way in this
Sure.
approach.
Yeah,
Um,
I can understand the
but
rationale. Not
that's who she is, man. It's like, because like you're feeling like, oh, I hope to have her in my home one day. Like, man, she she crushed life as an independent for as long as she possibly could.
I absolutely love that. What a great rubric for a woman, and a human being, an example of a great sapient. It sounds like, I
Hmm.
think there, I would aim to have somebody like be able to take. If you ask me, like, what are the two biggest areas we could focus on? It's our next generation, our previous generation. Giving the people exiting the best quality of life possible as they exit, and not forgetting how much they gave to the creation of our current reality, and then giving all the knowledge base and understanding to the next generation so that they can also seed that. We should have moments with the youth being with adults and elderly, and teaching them to care for them and take care of them. AI and automation will be great in the sense that you could have, quality of life for elderly be much better than what it is now, for those that can't afford it. But we
Yeah.
should be giving that as a gift to the elderly and saying, hey, let's take care of those people. So I'm big on that. So
Yeah.
the question that you asked earlier, I think, empathy is important. We have to understand that, most people, we get to understand that most people live a certain lifestyle, and we have to sit as greater thinkers. We have a bigger responsibility of sitting in their frame much easier than they can sit in our frame. That's why we're much greater at operating and building and doing greater things. So we have a much bigger responsibility on our end for emotional regulation, emotional intelligence, navigating the world and communicating to these masses so that they can understand what we're trying to accomplish and make it in a digestible format. You're of course always going to have edge cases of people that are obstinate and like, no, anarchy, whatever.
Yeah.
So, but the idea is that the larger curve is what we take on. I consider it ownership. Ownership. And every relationship I ever had, my fault. Any relationship breakup, my fault. Any conversation where friendship ends, my fault. Why? Because I take full ownership and accountability, in the sense that I just heard a friend say this recently. They were on a podcast and they said, and this is subtle ownership, ready? They said, oh, my friend, or I was working at this company, and in the company they just wouldn't listen to me. I knew all the answers and I had what they needed to help them, but they weren't paying attention to me. They wouldn't listen to what I had to say. So I left and I did it on my own, and I proved them wrong. That's a place of victimhood rather than ownership.
Yeah.
An owner mentality would have said, you know what? At the time I was working for these great leaders, gratitude and appreciation, because you obviously worked for someone that did something that you're trying to strive to. And at the time, I didn't have the communication skill set to best communicate my point across to them in a way that they could understand and would help them navigate the ship. I had some learning to do. I ended up taking that venture on my own to see if I could formulate what I was trying to tell them and execute it well, and I have. But if I had to look back at reflection, I could have been better in this sense. That's ownership. That's coming from a place of how I bettered, not they did this, and I just
Yeah.
don't mess in that realm. So I think for me, there's a lot of ownership in the more you want to impact, the more of an owner you have to be over your communication, your language, and how do you deliver a message to the masses that lands. So that's kind of the base, right? Okay. Next foundation, education, I think is key. We cannot take a society farther than they're willing to educate. Right now, education is like a baseline, bottom of the filter. Help me God, it's horrendous.
It's
Like,
bad.
dude, I actually, my company, I have everybody work from home because I believe in bringing the fabric of family back, mom and dad in the household, them having higher level ethereal conversations, seeing where money comes from, and then being able to be a part of your youth. That way you don't have kids coming home peeing in a kitty litter box and, saying that they want to be a boy or a girl or whatever they are, when it's like, hey, I understand you might be struggling. I know, hot take. I know, I'm so sorry. Hot take. I'm gonna get canceled here right now, and I could care less. I have a hard stance on this. Like, let humans be humans, let kids be kids, and we have so many things to be seeding in our youth before that articulation. If that's the highest level dilemma that you have in your school system, then I have to say we must demolish the entire thing and restart. STEM, science, mathematics, we're getting beat on almost every other metric around the world, crushed, absolutely crushed. And this is the highest level issue that we have, that we band around. We are misguided as an entire unit, right? So I have my whole thing is education, and that's why I pay people to get educated and be a part of education. We must
Yeah.
educate people with the tools that they need to be able to get to that next level in society: empathy, emotional intelligence, emotional regulation, ownership, right? And in doing so, you now have a society that can more easily digest, because they're not emotionally manipulatable, but rather they're looking at logic and data as a way of articulating what is a good decision for them. They have a decision tree, a matrix that they're going by. So education, I think, is a big portion of that. Next layer to that is health, bringing in mental health as a forefront of our, I would legalize every drug on the planet and use all the profits and tax dollars towards mental health. Like make it pay for itself. Like, you want to go do something, go for it. Smoke weed, enjoy yourself. You want to drink, it's toxin, destroys your brain, go for it. Nicotine, it's an addictive substance. Sure, we have dopamine receptors or nicotine receptors in our brain for tomatoes and eggplants at a small amount, but still a large amount, it's not great for you, right? But it is a
Right.
stimulant. Awesome. Crystal meth, coke, whatever. You want to go do your thing, Molly, get after it. But the money goes all back towards mental health and mental discovery of the masses to help people through their mental frameworks. Because most times people are abusing drugs, not utilizing recreationally, but abusing to escape the reality, because they don't have the tools to work
Yeah.
through current reality. So health is a big one. Teaching kids about water, clean water, glass water, chemicals, dyes, what gets put into our food or society. Thank God for RFK right now, that he's in here trying to figure out our health goods, like making sure that we understand that whatever we ingest mentally, visually, auditorily, physically, has a direct correlation to where our trajectory of our life is going, direct correlation in all health spans. So probably how I would answer that. A lot of empathy, and then challenging self to be a better communicator, and putting a plan before somebody to say, like, this is the best way. And if there's ever a failure, it's on us that we didn't do a good enough job articulating to the person before us. And
The
side
ownership part of that is
part.
it's so tough. It was a radical shift for me. The very first place I really ever heard that message from, well, I'll say to a point where it like really stuck. It was Gary J. White, actually. It was tell the truth and like own own yourself, basically. And it fundamentally changed everything, because exactly how you put it before. It was like I was in a motorcycle accident in 2022. I'm
Okay.
not a victim of the motorcycle accident. I chose to get on the motorcycle. I know that statistically, it's when I get in an accident, not if I get in an accident, right? I
Yeah.
consciously chose those things. It just happened to be then, right?
Hmm.
Like
Hmm. Hmm.
it's what it is. And like I can be like, well, the other guy shouldn't have been driving. And these are things that I think about pretty often, but I mean, because it really affected like me, my shoulder proximally dislocated backwards, shattered the head of the humerus, and have a surgery. I've got a plate and 13 screws up in here now, and it's like it seriously affected and impacted my life. But
Yeah.
if if it wasn't my fault and I have no ownership of it, then I have no control of it. But that's
Correct.
not true. It's my life. It's my shoulder. It's my arm. It's my strength, right?
Correct.
And
Correct.
so those are the ideals I had to carry with me into PT. There was a point in time where I couldn't lift my arm above right here. And for anyone who's listening on Spotify or Apple, basically it's like right at shoulder height. Like it was stuck here. I'm just like John McCaining it to everybody, just waving like, hey. So
John McCain.
okay, so um so you get to this point
Oh,
where you're
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 freaking hilarious.
like um you go to PT, and it's like you're trying to push past this thing, and you're like you get on the pulley, and the pulley pulls your arm up, and like you do all this stuff, and it's like if it happened to you and it was out of your control, you probably aren't going to get as far as like this is my arm, this is my life, these are my outcomes, I fight for them, right? I go up to the plate and I swing the bat to hit the ball, right? And now I'm fortunate enough to like because I pushed through PT, like I have like full range of motion, and like 98% mobility and strength with it. And like that's the level of ownership it takes for somebody in like to put it in another facet, right? Put it in wealth, put it in relationships.
Every
Like
every
these are the
part.
things that you design and you make decisions about because you own them. You control them. If you don't own them, you do not control them.
Correct. Oh my gosh, dude, I love your brain and I love talking to you. Yes, yes, and yes. If we could fundamentally, we're little behavioral animals, we're behaviorally
Yeah.
trained like copycats, if we could behaviorally train that into our youth or our generations, then we would be net positive as a society for sure. It adds so much ability for a youth to realize, I chose this, good or bad or indifferent, if they're not happy with the reality, it was your choice, and really seeding that, like I
Yeah.
think I think that we have a responsibility to the greater good, and I love how you frame that in just taking major ownership over your situation. And anybody could sit in your position and be like, "Oh, my motorcycle accident did this to me. It threw my life for a loop, and so now my life is this because of that moment." But you didn't do that. My mom was, and she'll allow me to say this online is, she was assaulted physically from age 14 to 18, almost daily. And
Mhm.
she overcame that. And she told me something that ingrained in me and made me a much stronger human for the rest of my life. She raised me with the mentality of you can either let your situation define you or you can define your situation. And that changed my reality as a whole. I never walked into circumstances as like, this is happening to me. I was like, no, I'm defining this moment. How am I
Yeah.
choosing to define this moment? I get to choose how to define this moment. Um, and in doing so, it's forever shaped my reality, and having that kind of mentality for any youth, I think, is a huge unlock. Share that message with everybody and anybody you can, because it really does
Hmm.
create a whole, a slew of leaders, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And also, I
So
want to emphasize with you on the COVID thing. I'm sorry for your grandma. I think COVID was a giant scam. Personally, hot take. I don't care who says it. Call me a conspiracy theorist. I believe that was a hot scam, and we're now seeing people having these weird diseases, these weird illnesses. Never in human history how we've been forced a medication by a government system to be put into our bodies. It was a huge gold rush of how can we stab as many people as possible in the arm. I got
when you
buffooned
say
at
never in history, you mean like in America, right?
worldwide, in a worldwide a format, to force a in a short period of time, in a year time span, to have every government around the world be in agreement to stop
Oh,
the
right, right,
war
right. Okay,
and
gotcha, gotcha.
implement this execution plan. That's never been done in history. I think an important thing to know as a sapien is be proud of yourself every moment, because it's the first time in human history Jimmy Allen is doing Jimmy Allen at 11:14 a.m. On Tuesday. It's the first time Reef Colman is doing Reef Colman at 11:14 a.m. 11:15 a.m. now in life. Like, you get to be proud of human you are. There's a lot to our species that we're doing for the first time that are proofs of concept. Food at large scale. We've never done that before. Feeding masses the way we are. We don't know the ramifications and implications of it. We shouldn't continue down a pathway that we're not sure of what it's going to do in the next couple of years, or if we already are seeing indicators of what it could do to nature, design, food, health, body, mental, brain, etc. We should start to look at it through a different lens. Back to the money talk, we shouldn't pursue the money, we should pursue the value of future generations, not the fleeting now game token and chip. Be more
Yeah.
selfless, be more responsible, reflective, rather than consuming what you can as you can, as fast as humanly possible. Things like space, flight, travel. We've never done that before. Technology, radiation from phones. This is our first time. These are all proofs of concept, that we're not aware of. Gaming, television, media, the way that we're doing it. We have to be more responsible for our reality. Medication as a whole and how we operate that in the medical system. These are proofs of concept that we as society have created, and we must reform them as society and our species grows. And we have to have great thought leaders that are at the forefront of these ideals, or these projects, that think of the world as a vision of years and generations, not just now, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was a giant scam. I think that never in human history has something like that been pulled off before, and we're now seeing the repercussions of it. I didn't get stabbed. I remember, someone in San Diego, a doctor being mad at me. They're like, "You got COVID." I was like, "Yeah." Like, "Do you have the vaccine?" No. Well, we're gonna vaccinate you today. I refuse. And you were. And then she gave me the most. She judged me in that moment. And gave me the reason you're causing lives. You're keeping elderly you're gonna hurt somebody else. You're so responsible, so selfish. It's hard in that moment as a
Yeah.
society. I think about Nazi Germany. Sitting in front of everybody and saying, "I think what we're doing is wrong." When a whole society is making it feel like it's okay. You have to be a truly grounded person to say, I'm not 100% in agreement with what's happening around here, and really stand in that and be okay with being judged, misspoken or mistalked about. One of my favorite caveats for how I choose friends at the bottom, it says, people that are okay with being misunderstood, my favorite types of humans. You are willing
Mm,
understood because of what you believe a concept is. And I love that for you. Let's have a conversation and dialogue around that. Why do you hold so strongly these ideals? What do you know that maybe I don't know? We can add to each other's, wheelhouse.
mhm.
So yeah, I'm sorry. I empathize for your grandma, and my mom also took the stab. So I continue
Yeah.
to feel concerned of, what
No
that.
hard stuff with her or anything like that?
Not yet, not yet. But a weird thinking in me is, it's not about if, but when we're going to see the repercussions of
Yeah.
this mass tool. I think it's a mass weapon, mass tool, whatever it was mass something, and there was intentionality behind it. When that lever gets pulled, God forbid, we see what really was the maniacal menace behind it, or the mechanism behind it. So
Yeah.
that deep. So we've
Stuff
got.
gets planned. I'll say stuff gets planned for evil that God can plan for good. God's powerful enough to do that. I'll just drop that there.
I
The
thank you for
sorry, go
that.
ahead.
That's a beautiful perspective. Thank you. That's a reframe for me. That I try to sit in a realistic seat and have to remember that sometimes things happen the way they happen, and society will do what society does. And I think for us higher thought leaders or people that like to think in the ethereal, you truly do have to kind of take a moment and sit back and go, okay, everything's going to be okay, and not become worked up emotionally, because I do get worked up by that
Yeah.
stuff. Big time. So.
Well, they made it personal, so kind of hard to not. But anywho, um, Reef, there's over 8 billion people on the planet,
Yeah.
and somehow, like you were mentioning just a few minutes ago, like majority of those people get fed through food systems, right? The majority of those people get fed daily, which is huge. But there's a ton of people that also go without. And what is one thing in alignment with with your mission, right? It's like, and correct me here. Was it 1 million families, or did you want to feed 1 million people?
1 million families worldwide monthly. Yeah, a million people, but a person is essentially a head of household that feeds their family. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So in the process of doing that, like I believe that a really it's a lot to put on your shoulders alone. Like
Mm.
you're just one guy. You're just Reef, right? But what if you had an army of people that took like a fraction of the steps that you did in order to make that happen? And by the way, I'm not saying that as like you're just Reef. Like, what are you gonna do?
No, I'm one
Like
sapien. Yeah,
as a human, like bro, you're just a human. You've got the same 24 hours in the day that
correct,
I do, right?
correct.
But for somebody who really aligns with that idea, and wants to join in on the impact, what's something that they can do today to join your mission and be a small part in feeding people around the globe? What would you recommend for somebody who wanted to start small?
Oof. I have like 30 kids in Nicaragua. We just got gifts for 50 in El Salvador. I got like 24 youth in Colombia. We do pizza parties for monthly, and 180 youth in the Philippines. I love the youth big time. And then families as a whole. The way I've taken this mission on is I have international headhunting company, and I help people get jobs. And I find that people do a lot better when they get purpose behind what they're doing. They become community leaders because they have purpose in
Hmm.
what they're doing. I
Yeah.
find that just giving food out or handing out, it has a little bit of a negative effect, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, doing good and what's bad. It's helpful for the moment, but then people become dependent on it and they don't know how to
Right.
self-sustain. They just want more of that. So I believe that creating self-sustaining opportunities for people is key. If you can give somebody employment or work or ability for them to earn or make a reality, is a really good way to bless the world. On my end, several yeah, why not? Let's talk projects. I love projects. Several projects working on WeAssist.io is creating a internal platform. The internal platform has an HR bot that helps be with people, handles all the conversations that you need to handle as an HR that take up most of the time, but also knows their birthday, their anniversary, their kids' birthdays, and all these other things that they can bring up, especially their like favorite coffee place or lunch place,
Yeah.
etc. So really excited for that on that side. So creating that dashboard where people could choose people's healthcare, family healthcare, dental, mental, vision, 13-month salary bonus, and do payroll through it, all as a solution. So we're about 60 days away from having the functioning test pilot, which I'm very excited for. With that, people will be able to then purchase their own instance where they can actually run their own outsourcing agency if they'd like to, with ethics, proper ethics and morality, and giving people PTO, pay time off, etc., at a very low cost point. So I want to be able to give that to the masses. How can someone effectively help today? If anybody knows anyone that's looking to for an offshore talent or an executive assistant, executive sales assistant, et cetera, or AI assistant, an assistant that literally works on AI tools with you, which is huge. You need to get that through
Yeah.
the revolution. That's what we supply most of our people with. They can be part of our Families Fed campaign. Our Families Fed campaign are people that feed families by giving us and sharing with us someone that needs to be hired. So a family fed is a placement in someone's company. So they feed their family, of course, right? At the
Hmm.
end of the year, we'll do an award ceremony, and people will get a golden plate award for 2-digit earners, 3-digit earners, and 4-digit earners. It looks like Bloomingdale is going to be the 3-digit earners because beautiful plates. But the idea is that then we'll give a plate set to that family, the people that contributed or sent us a bunch of warm introductions, and they'll earn a plate. And in that plate set, they'll have fine china because we no longer have fine china as a society. So I want to be the provider of
Yeah.
really nice plates at home. One of my other projects is onemorestar.org. That is a fund that I've been working on here for the last couple of years, where people donate to that fund or that organization, and that money sits in a holding. And then when someone needs a project around the world, you give them the money, but they have to then pay that money back to that fund or organization. So if you are needing, like, let's say you want to build an extension to your patio or to your little liquor store or whatever you have somewhere else, convenience store, you'd get a donation or a fund given to you, and then you pay back the fund over time. Non-predatory loan, right? You pay back as you need, or if you hit a hardship, so be it. But then that money gets cycled back in. So instead of donating every year, you could just donate once and watch your $1,000 repeat and repeat and repeat business and help people and serve people and love on people. The people that apply for it, however, need to have a way of paying back. They have to show a format of paying back. They have to be put into a financial literacy course, so they're expanding their financial literacy. And once they pay it back in full, they're now good nominees to nominate the next person. So they can come to Jimmy and say, "You need money? I just got help from these people. Come over." But they're now both responsible for that co-lending. So you have to only bring friends that
Yeah.
you are going to be able to pay it back, as necessary. Otherwise, you're on the bill for it as well.
Mm.
The AI, we've been building so much AI with people that we started our own company, AIbusinessautomations.io. Very excited for that. So we're building automations out for people from the ground up, not with wrappers, but actual ground up development to really help.
Right.
Because as the things evolve, you're going to end up buying like 10, 15, 20 wrappers over time. Instead, just build on your own foundation because the knowledge base grows, so keep that going. From that, we also implement a person. So we help you find an offshore talent to go into your ecosystem to manage that AI automation and tool, which we're very excited for. And the last one is the AI Spaces and AI Fireside Chat. AI Fireside Chat's a free group, just like Teddy Roosevelt's Fireside Chats that he once had, which I loved. When the country was going through a very hard time, he would get on the radio and people heard the voice of a leader. So AI Fireside Chats are a free group, and then the AI Spaces is the paid group. where you can go in and it's a classroom setting or a knowledge-based setting where you have an instructor in given rooms that are talking about a speciality of one format or another, and you can ask that person direct questions, N8N Nation, right? Or maybe with ClickUp or ClickFunnels or Go High Level. How are people operating these tools, and what are some automations? You
Yeah.
can talk to someone directly, and that also gives the instructor or the person in front to have an opportunity to also teach others and say, hey, you know what, I can help you do it yourself, but if you need help, you can contract me, kind of deal. So it creates an ecosystem of knowledge. My goal there is to make scientists, engineers, mathematicians, and developers, kings of our society and queens of our society, instead of, you know, fill
Yeah.
your fill your
Like,
brain, not your lips. Yeah, yeah, exactly. 100%.
dude.
And the last one I'm dabbling with is a group that I call Reframes, which I've been asked to do for some time now. And I struggle thinking that I should be in front of a group of people because I don't have an exit, like $100 million exit, or haven't done anything notable yet in society at a large scale. So it feels very impostery to talk to people about life. But
I have a reframe for you on that, but
okay. Yeah, I love that.
I think just the fact that you are in process right now more than qualifies you. Like there's some people that like think and hope and things like that, but I think because you have taken actionable, measurable steps across all of these different facets, like you're more than qualified to get in front of a group of people and be like,
Thank you.
Here's my playbook. This is what I'm doing. This is what I have found so far. This is where we're going, right?
Mm, yeah.
You're more than qualified, dude. Sell
I
yourself short.
I love you and I appreciate you for saying that. Maybe you could help me. I don't even know how to. Yeah. You're yes. Yeah, I'm taking a step into it and doing it. It's reframes, reef frames. Like reframe.
Yeah, I know. I caught that.
You got that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're creating kind of like a place for people to come and ask some of the more ethereal questions, like, "Hey, how are you navigating this?" Well, this is one perspective, not like the truth. It's just that's how I'm approaching it. Maybe this will help you grow off of it. If you get better data, share it with me, kind of deal, right?
Mhm.
But just one perspective on life and how I'm choosing to do this sapient walk and and navigating life in hopes that it helps spur somebody else through their journey. So
Maybe you should start a podcast, kind of. I don't know what platform or what medium you were gonna like facilitate all of this through, but like I don't know. Maybe it should be a podcast.
man, I was gonna do a WAP, like a WAP
Oh,
group.
okay, gotcha. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like
Perfect.
people on a WAP and then kind of run it through there. But I'd love to tap on your shoulder for things like Riverside. It seems like a cool platform, like
Dude, they take all the like minutia in podcast production and just make it really simple. So
good. That's
it's not yeah, it's just nice
yeah, it's just
because yeah.
nice. Simple. What a good articulation of something. It's just nice.
It's
That's
just
good.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Bro, okay. So thank you for all the answers on there for all the different things that you're doing. And for anyone who was looking, like obviously we'll get to a point here pretty soon where like you'll have an opportunity to reach out and connect with Reef and like connect on all the different initiatives he's got going on. If anything like piqued your interest or caught your ear. Um I have one other question as a follow-up to that. If somebody wanted to assume ownership, like obviously
Mm,
I I agree with your thought process on well, we need to get people plugged into we'll say like a mutually beneficial system where it's like someone is providing, but also somebody is like plugged into a job or a role that actually helps them earn that as opposed to receiving that and creating a dependency, right? But if somebody, let's say like Joe down the street is like, man,
yeah.
I just like I've been blessed recently. I want to be able to get plugged in and like feed a family. And like maybe it's not a long-term thing. Maybe it's like I've got excess now. What can
Mm,
I do now today? Well,
mm.
what two parts. Where would you direct them and what questions would you have them asking like their family and then their community?
Mm. Yeah, I'd probably say going to your local churches is a great place to start. A church is a wonderful center hub for those in need, finding a family that is maybe in a hard time. And, pastors do an incredible job of being great listeners. It's not an easy role, very, very difficult. But finding an office or a good nonprofit to be a part of. A church is a great place to stem and seed from, and ask them, are there any
Yeah.
families I could serve or help, or, somebody who's down and out and just needs something, maybe $100 will change their month, great place to
Yeah.
start. There's also the city has a list of like lower income families and people that are, you know, I was in Glendora school district and I was incredible to see the school district right next door that was split by only a street. 86% of the kids were considered homeless technically, which is underprivileged or lower income, and that's
Hmm.
or low income considered under the poverty line, 86%, and then a portion of those were considered homeless. Fascinating to see how some people live in our own backyard, our neighborhood. Then asking the question of what does this person need? I think it's pretty presumptuous of us to be like, hey, I'm giving this. Sometimes it's, hey,
Yeah.
what are you looking for? Sometimes just a contact or a connection to a friend might be all they need to really get their life back on track. Your network alone might be a huge plug for a person or a human being. So it doesn't always have to be food or
Yeah.
monetary or whatever, what have you. It could just be energetic and time.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I agree.
So that, it's finding
Yeah.
that need and having the time or the human decency to ask a question of somebody. What are your, what do you need right now? What's your biggest need and requirement? And sometimes it might be money. It might be like, hey, I need to get out of this bill or I'm in debt, so on and so forth. Maybe helping
Yeah.
them think differently or outside the box. But what are you doing for work right now? What are your skill sets? What could you like to do for work? How can I plug you into certain instances? But having a conversation is very important. That's why when you see me, I'm with kids in like areas, and I'm like literally in this like slums playing soccer with kids, and like kicking the ball around. I've stepped on questionable objects that have cut my foot open on beaches where I'm like, oh my god, puncture holes all through my foot. And then me and the kids, we realized how ugly the beach gets, and I was like, have you guys ever done a beach cleanup? No. I ended up getting all 30 kids with the municipalities there, and we cleaned the beach. And for the first time in the mind, they were mind blown, like, why do these adults care what we're doing? And I was like, because if you do good, people want to be a part of your good. And it's the only time that you'll see people of high affluence hanging out with like people that might be of different, socioeconomic
Yeah.
standing, is when you both have a shared mission together and you're creating an objective, like making the beach better, or making the world a better place. That's where you can really create common ground with people of high affluence or high leverage or high importance, by pouring into things that they're both commonly in love with, that you both
Yeah.
together.
Shared values.
Correct. Totally shared values. You create that kind of an ecosystem, and now you have a very strong format for building a bond. So it blew their mind to see people like, wow, these adults care about us teenagers, like that are just cleaning up a beach. Shifted
Yeah.
quite a few of their mindsets, which is quite nice. But I've cut my feet on some things where I'm like, I should get a tetanus shot. In countries that do not have, I wouldn't even go to the hospital for a needle. I'm like, oh, that might
Right.
a worse outcome by going to the hospital.
Yeah.
So I think sharing time and energy with people is a very big. Money's a joke, Fugazi. Time is the true currency. Yeah, yeah, yep, 100%. Yeah, Wolf, talk to me, Wolf. It's really time is the currency. Love and empathy are the currencies of our humanity. They're the things that
Mhm.
matter. Listening, talking to one another, enjoying, sharing, breaking bread, making people feel heard, listened, understood, cared for. Those are the currencies. The money is just a tool like any other. Time is a true currency. So if you share that
Yeah.
with somebody, it's probably the most special thing that you could share with a person. So
Dang.
ask questions of what a person needs. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. So, Reef, thanks so much. We're coming up on an hour and a half here, 90 freaking minutes, dude. And it has been, I'm telling you, I shot down like at least 12 questions that were popping
Why?
in my
What
head.
is that? Go again.
I have more stuff that I have to do today. It's so stupid. Dude. Okay.
We'll get another one. We'll get another one on the books. I'll have
We'll get
Kate.
another one.
Yeah.
Deal. All right. Absolutely.
And we'll do a
So
Joe Rogan. We'll do a Joe Rogan pool. Maybe I'll fly out to you. We'll do like a 3 hour, 4 hour sit down and just have a ball and just free flow
we
conversation.
should. So I'm setting up the home studio here. Like we'll have a separate angle, but basically like I'm getting different displays here, a different like the same kind of like chair, and we can literally like sit across from each other with a couple of like Shure mics and just like talk and like hash it out, like figure out all of these, like you said, upper
Yeah.
level ethereal spiritual questions. I'm down. I'm super game if you want to come out and do a
Honored.
podcast.
I'd be honored to be your first guest on a new format, and I will make the flight. I'll pay for my own tickets. I'll do the whole thing just to be out there and sit face to face with you. We'll power a whole.
Epic.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, dude, it's gonna be good. Okay, so what's the best way for someone to get connected with like you? Like what's going on in Reef's world?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a pretty open person about sharing my time and energy with people. DM me on any platform. It's at Reef Colman, REEF, like the coral reef, Colman, like the camping gear without the E, COLMAN, no E. That's my at for every handle. I lucky to have. Yahoo me, Gmail me. I don't know. My cell phone,
Yeah.
602-5086. Feel free to text me, show me a message, and um, I love doing video warm intros, so I send a video. Hey, hi, my name's Reef. Hope you're doing well. Just so send me a warm video of who you are and what you are and what you want to talk about, and that way we can have a chat around it. That's actually my cell phone number. I'll add you as my executive assistant so that it's also buffered. But yeah, I'm
Nice.
I'm pretty approachable with people. I
Hmm.
especially talk to people that want to make the world a better place, that are mission and vision oriented, that want to do great things. I love
Yeah.
those conversations, and I love, like you said, traveling around the world and meeting people. I love surrounding myself with great minds. It's a huge
Yeah.
gift.
Well, I'll say that so we got introduced through a mutual friend. Huge shout out to Kevin. Thank you for the intro, by the way. Hopefully you listened all the way through to now, so you could hear my shout out. But one of the things he said is like, "Oh, dude, go follow him on Instagram," and I'll just reach out to Reef however you're gonna reach out to him, right? But like, go follow him on Instagram. The stuff that he's putting out there is like, it's incredible. I watch what Reef does, and then I get inspired about like, well, how am I gonna show up? Like Reef's out here like engaging and like psyching up and like energizing all these like kids and like encouraging them with his words and like in his energy and his presence. And I'm like, well, how am I gonna show up for my kid today? Like I'm not like hanging out with my kid, but like, dude, how am I gonna show up and like, even if like I'm getting out of the car and it's like, oh, it was like a long day, like all this stuff. We did 12 hours yesterday, 8 to 8. And I get back home and I'm like, how am I gonna show up for my kid? You know, because I'm watching how Reef shows up for kids, and I just so like you'll find out all the amazing stuff that Reef's got going on. But go follow him on Instagram, plus however you plan on reaching out to him.
Bro, thank you. That was I appreciate you. Yeah, it makes I yeah, thank you. I try really hard to be a good human and a good example for others. And you saying you verbal. I don't think we verbalize enough. I practice gratitude a lot, and I tell people why I'm grateful. So today, my sign off for everybody would be: call the person you love in your life that's impacted you the most, and tell them how they've impacted your life. Is how I'd probably leave today. And you sharing that piece of gratitude and your perspective is incredibly grateful. I'm incredibly grateful for it. I'm thankful
Yeah,
because you don't know what you're doing or how you're affecting people. You're just putting out content hoping it's doing something. But when you hear direct feedback, it does something to you internally. And I'm just so thankful.
for
Uh,
sure.
yeah, Jimmy, thank you. And to Kevin too and Joshua, you guys, I'm just, I'm thankful. Yeah, just thank you.
They're
Grateful.
pretty rad, right? They're
Oh,
pretty
wonderful
cool.
humans, absolutely beautiful humans all the way through. Love those
Yeah.
humans. Yeah, wonderful people, deserving of great accolades for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for listening and tuning in. This has been the Better Humans podcast. We'll catch you all on the next episode. I have no idea who will be on, but I guarantee you they're going to be better humans. I don't know.
A good human.
That is the worst outro I've ever done.
You do it again. You want to do it again? I think
Yeah, let's do it again.
you'd be a good human. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks everyone for coming on to the Better Humans. Dude, it's it's my show. It's my show.
It was a good outro. I think that was a perfect outro. That was
I love
solid.
it.